Hey guys, it's Jeff. I'm actually doing the call today, so everybody's in the office. Mike's here, Trisha's here. Missy's on vacation, but otherwise everybody at ECA is there, so we're all here. We hope you guys had a great weekend. Um, Usually I don't do the call, so I'm not as familiar with the technology and everything. So if you type in questions and I don't answer it, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It could be that I'm just not seeing it. I don't look over there as often as maybe Mike does. So I apologize in advance. We always start with the 5Q 5-minute moneymaker. Here we're talking about the fact that people don't think that the market's going to go down. With as many years of steady up as we've seen, people have a lot of confidence in the market. They don't foresee any kind of a downturn, which means they're perfectly comfortable staying in there. And I think that feeds into this part in the FIA presentation. Those of you that have done the FIA presentation or have looked at it, you know there's a part that we talk about how people cannot get out of the market on their own. They need somebody to do it automatically or something to do it automatically for them. We even talk about the emotions that they go through, that they get to this sense of euphoria where they think nothing's ever going to be any bad or anything different. But we know that it's not like that. You know, the market runs in cycles. There are a lot of things out there that could cause a downturn, not that they will anytime soon, but they might. And we always have to be prepared for that. And we have to help people to understand that there's no way to time the market. If you're going to be successful in investing, you need something to do that for you, and that's what FIAs do. So take a look at that if you haven't had a chance to see that. And then we have the 5Q breakdown. And like we always talk about, make sure that you're really spending time with this. Here we talk about the importance of empowering somebody early, and there's a great example how to do that. A lot of times I get this question. People will ask me, hey, I know you guys have this because you guys, you know, are really good about cataloging and keeping things, but are there tapes of somebody doing the meeting perfectly, the 21-point checklist meeting perfectly? Because I'd like to hear that just so I can kind of get a feel for what it's supposed to sound like. And the answer is probably the same as, well, is there a tape of a quarterback playing the perfect football game? No, not perfect. But then the next question that would naturally arise is, well, okay, maybe not perfect, but really well, doing it really, really well, so that I could hear what it sounds like when people do it really, really well. And the answer is yeah. And every week we send you a 5 to 15-minute snippet of somebody doing it really, really well, or maybe making a little bit of a mistake that we can correct. And that's what these are. So you get those. Make sure you're listening to them. Make sure you're using them. If you don't have tapes of your own, these are great tapes to use for your 15-minute drill each and every day. But don't just, because they come every week, it's easy to take these for granted. Don't do that. Make sure you're spending time, not just listening to it once and going through it, but really internalizing it, listening to it over and over, and using it and what you learn from it in your meetings. Kind of switching gears now, I want to start with this question. And the question is, what would happen if you asked people this? Is there the possibility that maybe sometime down the road you might want to take income from your savings and investments? So if you ask people, is there the possibility that maybe sometime down the road you might want to take income from your savings or your investments, what do you think the answer would be? I mean, I would tell you it's almost universally yes. Part of it is probably the way I ask the question, is could you maybe sometime might want to take income from your investments? And people inevitably say, well, yeah, I suppose maybe sometime I might want to take income from my investments. So income planning is increasingly a big deal. I mean, we know that there are fewer pensions that are out there. Pensions are fast becoming extinct. And Social Security has been flat. Social Security does not, in spite of what the government may claim, keep up with inflation. And inflation being really, really low these past few years, everybody's looking at their Social Security and thinking, wow, it's just staying flat. And baby boomers are turning 70 and a half. We talked a long time ago that the very first baby boomer turned 70 and a half last January. Not this January, a year ago January. So they're starting to turn 70 and a half en masse. In fact, Schwab had this quote. This is in the Wall Street Journal. Charles Schwab, which manages some $208 billion in 401k assets, typically has to move 10% of those funds around in any given year due to retirements, deaths, or job changes. Schwab expects that number to rise to 15% because of required withdrawals. So these RMDs are a big deal. I mean, to jump from 10 to 15% is a huge jump. That's 50% more activity than they normally see just because of people turning 70 and a half. And you might think, well, a 5% difference isn't that big a deal, but 5% of $208 billion is a lot of money. It's about $1 billion. It's a little over $1 billion extra each and every year. Now, I'm not going to talk about RMDs today. That's not what this call is about, but I just make that point to let you know that withdrawals and income planning are really on people's mind. What I do want to talk about today is a way to create arguably the best income plan available, and I'm going to argue the only one that is literally guaranteed to work. So we're going to talk about creating the best income plan available, the only one that's guaranteed to work. And we're also going to talk about how to present that income plan using the ideas in motivational interviewing. So as we do that, the first thing to understand is that people don't live in a bubble. At some point in their life, they start thinking about taking income, and they start reflecting on the things they've been told and the things they've read and the things they've heard about taking income. So I think a good starting place for us is to kind of take a look at what's probably in their mind when they come to see you or talk to you about taking income. So one of the things that's on their mind, or one of the things they think is, well, what if we laddered bonds? Now, here's the good news. That could work. The great thing about bonds is they have a set interest rate. And because they have a set interest rate, we can easily calculate how much we would need to invest in order to get the income we need. So just as an example, if we needed $40,000 a year in income from our investments and bonds are paying 4%, well, it's easy to calculate how much do we need to put into bonds. You just take the $40,000 a year you need, you divide it by the interest rate that you can get, in this case 4%, and you know that you need $1 million to put into bonds in order to generate $40,000 a year in reliable and predictable income, meaning we can count on that. And that's going to come in like a paycheck. Now, those are all good things, but bonds do have some drawbacks. The first thing, or the most immediate thing that jumps out to you is $1 million in bonds. Is that a little or a lot? That's a lot. Most people don't have that to put into bonds. And even if you did, what kind of diversification would you have if 90 to 100% of your money is going into one asset class? No diversification whatsoever. The other thing that's not maybe immediately obvious is there's no protection against inflation. Because to get a 4% interest rate, you're going to have to go for a long-term bond. And yeah, they're going to pay 4%, but forever. And prices are going to rise faster because of inflation as we start moving further and further off into the future. We all experience that. We all know that. So a couple of the downsides are no diversification, no protection from inflation, but the most obvious and the one that we walk people through is they're interest rate sensitive. If interest rates go up, bonds go down. And like we show people in the 21-point checklist meeting when we talk about interest rate sensitivity in bonds, it doesn't take a big jump in bonds to create a big, big drop in the value. In the example that we use in the 21-point checklist, If interest rates only went up 1%, you could see a 33, 34, 35% drop in the value of bonds. And we're in a low interest rate environment right now. And interest rates are really only predicted to go in one direction, and that is up.
Can I jump in there for a second, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I sold bonds at Wells Fargo, and I've had a few guys say, "Really? Does that, you're telling me that if interest rates go up 1%, you're going to see a 30% downward move in bonds?" Yeah, I saw an over. I mean, I had to deal with clients back in the 90s with less than a half a percent increase in interest rates. We saw bonds fall 30%, because remember, a lot of these bonds are second-tier bonds. They're bonds that have been used, quote unquote, used bonds. They're not minted right out of the Treasury. So they've already taken a hit when they were sold, because the people who sold them took a commission off of that. And so when the interest rates went up, it really clobbered these bonds heavily. So does that actually? Yes, I have seen it. And there's nothing worse than dealing with a client who's pissed off because they thought this guaranteed thing wouldn't go down, and they're looking at a statement that says their bonds are down 30%. So those of you who are thinking, oh, that'll never happen, I've lived it. It happens, and with less than 1%. Sorry.
Yeah, and it's guaranteed to happen practically. I mean, we know interest rates have already gone up. At the last Fed meeting, they raised interest rates, and they came right out and said they're having 2 more meetings this year and expect interest rates to go up 2 more times before the end of the year. So people, they hear that, they know that, and they understand that. And when we walk them through the 21-point checklist, we're not just telling them that bonds are going to go down. They're going to see for their very own eyes that that is, in fact, what's going to happen. Now, here's the thing. Could a bond ladder work? Yeah, it could work. But is it guaranteed to work? No, not if interest rates go up. Not if we have a lot of inflation. Not if we don't have $1 million and if we don't have enough money to put towards bonds to make that happen. Now, a lot of financial advisors in the past used to recommend bond ladders, but you don't see that very often anymore for all the reasons we just talked about. Not even financial advisors are thinking this is a good idea. Instead, what they recommend to their clients is this. They say, well, how about this? Why don't we put our money in a big bag, a big hodgepodge? Some of it'll be stocks, some of it'll be bonds, some of it'll be mutual funds. It'll just be a big mix. And that big mix solves some of the problems that you have with bonds. The first thing being, we're diversified. We're not just in one asset. We're in stocks, bonds, mutual funds. And because of the upside potential of the equities, we can grow to stay ahead of inflation, at least in theory. And that also dampens the impact of interest rate volatility. We're still going to hold some bonds for safety, and they may experience some interest rate volatility, but at least it won't be your whole portfolio. So we'll be watering that down. What we'll do instead is we'll just withdraw the money systematically, being careful not to exceed a certain percentage. And I think all of you have heard at one time or another the 4% withdrawal strategy. You just put your money in a big bag of stocks and bonds. You just don't take out more than 4%. Now that interest rate has been changing. If you read articles, some people will say, well, 4%'s even a little too high. It's really closer to 3 or 3.5. But irregardless, that's the thing that people are most familiar with. That's the thing that their advisor is probably going to recommend to them. And what we always tell people is that can work too. I mean, it's not like it can't work. It can work. It's just it only works as long as the markets cooperate. Now, here's what I mean by that. The idea is we're going to take our income from interest or dividends or capital gains. And again, as long as the markets cooperate and we stay within that percentage, we'll be fine. But let me ask you guys a question. Is there ever a time when both bonds are down because interest rates are up and the markets are down? Has that ever happened? Yeah, it's happened. It's happened many times in the last 10 or 15 years. It's probably happened 4 or 5 times in the last 15 years. And people are retiring at 65 and now they're living to be, and some people are retiring earlier. We're seeing a trend for people retiring earlier and earlier, and we're also seeing a trend for people living longer and longer. So it's possible to run into somebody who's retired at 60 and might live to be 90. That's 30 years. Do we really expect that the markets are going to cooperate each and every one of those 30 years? Or do we know that there will be down years? We know that. Everybody knows that. You don't even have to be a financial advisor to know that. But here's what happens when the markets are down, both bonds and stocks are down, if there is no interest and there is no dividends and there are no capital gains in that particular year because the markets aren't cooperating, where do you have to take the money from if you still need it? The principal. But if you start taking money from principal, what do you start to worry about? Running out. What a lot of advisors would say is, well, let's just don't take money in those down years, but is that realistic for somebody who needs income? Would that be appealing or attractive if it was explained to them that way? No, it wouldn't. My point here is that bonds could work, but they're not guaranteed to work. A lot has to go right outside anyone's control, namely interest rates have to stay steady or go down. This hodgepodge, this mix of stocks and bonds could work, but it's not guaranteed to work. A lot would have to go right. The markets would have to cooperate. And if we were only going to be retired at 65 and die at 72, maybe we don't have to worry. But if we're going to retire at 63 and live to be 87, yeah, we probably have to worry. None of that's guaranteed to work. So let me show you something that is guaranteed to work. In fact, it's the only thing that's guaranteed to work. It's this sale plan. It's laddering of annuities. We're putting the money that we need for income in laddered annuities, and we're putting the money that we want in growth in some sort of equity. So let me kind of explain what we're looking at. We're looking at a couple, John and Mary Smith, who has $375,000 to put toward a plan. And they're looking at taking $1,500 a month. And like most people their age, they're in their mid-60s, they want their money 50-50, half in growth, half in safe. What the sales software does, and we're going to look at it in detail in a few minutes, but I just want to give you a quick overview before we do that. What it does is it shows you how you would have to ladder those assets, that $375,000 a year, in order to generate that $1,500 a month guaranteed for the 10 years of the plan. So in asset one, we'd start with $87,000 and change. In asset two, we'd start with $71,000 and change. In asset three, we'd start with $27,000 and change. And in asset four, we would have $187,000 and change. Now, how it gets to that is it says, well, you want 50% in the market. Well, there's your $187,500 in asset four. And then this is how we would ladder that safe portion in order to make sure that you get that $1,500 per month. Now, I'm going to go through this in more detail as the call goes on, but what I really want to talk about just for a second and make you aware of is that this is laddering software. So the nice thing about laddering annuities in particular is they're not interest rate sensitive since we aren't laddering bonds. In fact, if interest rates go up, that's bad for bonds, but that's good or bad for annuities? That's good. It means that we're in line to get better rates if they continue to go up. Also notice that we start with $375,000 in this account. That's the initial investment. But even as we're taking income, this account is still going to end up with more money than you started with. So if there is inflation, we have a plan for that. We can take more money if we need to as prices go up. And because we're laddering annuities, the income is guaranteed. There's no other plan that can really guarantee you that it's going to work and last, this is the only plan that will do that. This laddering of annuities with money and equities on the back end for growth. And we don't have to worry what the markets are doing, again, because the income's guaranteed. True, this could go up and down, but if we don't touch it for 10 years, the thinking is the markets are more up than down so that we don't really have to worry. Where we get into trouble is if we start pulling money out of a down market. And because we're pulling our income from the annuities, we're kind of sheltering ourselves or safeguarding ourselves from that. Now, again, we looked at the ideas for taking income that are out there, bonds or kind of a mix of stocks and bonds, and we said they could work, but this is the only one that's guaranteed to work. And so what do you think everybody chooses if given the choice between two things that might or might not work or one thing that will absolutely positively work, contractually guaranteed? Everybody's going to choose this. Now, here's the thing. We talked a lot about the advantages of laddering. We said we didn't have to worry about interest rate sensitivity. In fact, interest rates going up only help us. We don't have to worry about the markets cooperating because we're taking our income from guaranteed annuities. And because they're guaranteed, this plan will work. No ifs, ands, or buts. So those are the advantages of laddering. But let me ask you guys a question. Can you think of any disadvantages of laddering? I'll just stop and wait for a second to think if anybody can think of any disadvantages to laddering. The reality is there are none. It's not that you can't think of any disadvantages to laddering, or I can't think of any disadvantages to laddering. Nobody can think of any disadvantages to laddering. The only thing I've ever heard is, well, it's more paperwork and it might not be necessary. But that's not really a disadvantage. That's just saying, hey, you might not have to do it. There might be other ways that could work. But if you want the way that will work, that's guaranteed to work, well, then you do it this way. Laddering works. It's settled science. It's not just me that says that. It's not just us that can't think of any reasons not to do it. The General Accounting Office has said that laddering annuities is the only plan that's guaranteed to work. There's a professor at the Wharton School of Business, a guy who writes a lot. Many of you know him or have read his articles, Wade Pfau. He says the same thing. This is guaranteed to work. That's the only thing that he knows of that's guaranteed to work. Laddering works. And laddering annuities is the only way to contractually guarantee the income that people are looking to take in retirement. Now, laddering annuities is preferable to laddering bonds because we've seen, again, the interest rate sensitivity of bonds, and the consensus, even among longtime investment strategists like Roger Ibbotson, is that annuities generally outperform bonds. So we have a lot of people. We have the government, the General Accounting Office. We have academia, a Wharton School of Business professor, Wade Pfau, saying that this is the best thing to do. We have an investment strategist, a well-known investment strategist, in Roger Ibbotson, saying this is the thing to do. In fact, annuities are beginning to be recognized not only as the best way to take income from the government and academia and well-known investment strategists, it's also being recognized by the private sector. There are big companies rushing to get consumers to do this through what I would call robo channels. So here's one. It's called Blueprint Income. This is their website. Introducing the personal pension, a guaranteed paycheck to make sure you don't run out of money in retirement. Guess what they're selling? Annuities, income annuities. The same thing that you're selling. Even they know, hey, this is the only thing that works. We got to get in on this. Now, you guys, the fact that somebody is going out there and trying to market direct to the consumers, I think should be a wake-up call a little bit to us. But like we always talk about, don't be too afraid, because how you present something is just as important to what you present when it comes to any kind of sale. That's why insurance companies just can't go out and market annuities direct to the consumer. It doesn't work that way. They would love to cut you out, but they can't. Here's another thing. They're trying to market this direct to the consumer. They would love to cut you out, but what we'll find is how you present something is just as important as what you present, and that's why this probably isn't as much of a threat as it would initially appear. But remember, because that's true, how you present it is just as important as what you present. We're going to look at some software to put together these sale plans, but don't think you can just slap this in front of a consumer and show them the numbers, and they're going to look at it and be like, ah, sold. If it worked that way, then Blueprint Income will put you out of business. But it doesn't work that way. So let's talk about how you present the sale plan, and then we're going to look at how you put one together. So here's how you present it. This is that plan that we looked at earlier, and I just want to walk you through the presentation that you would use when you're talking to clients. Now, before we or as an introduction to that, where do I present this? Where do you think this would appear in the 5Q process? At the beginning, in the middle, or at the end? At the agreement meeting, the 21-point checklist meeting, or the implementation meeting? The end, everybody's getting it. This is what happens at the implementation meeting. The agreement meeting, we're gathering facts so that we can get the information we need to put together a 21-point checklist. At the 21-point checklist, we're going through the things on that list and getting people to say, I don't want to work with my advisor. He isn't being honest with me. He's hiding things from me on purpose. I don't want anything to do with him. I want to get as far away as possible from him. What would you recommend that I do? And so this is one of our recommendations. So here's how I would present this. At the implementation meeting, again, you're letting people know that you're reviewing the 21-point checklist, getting them to remind themselves that, hey, we don't want to work with our guy because he's not honest with us. He hides things from us. He's doing this to us on purpose. He's taking advantage of us. We're here. We want your help. We want to know what you would recommend. So again, I go back to the idea that people don't live in a bubble. And so we talk a little bit about income, and I say something like this. One of the things that when we talk about income, let's talk about your paycheck. When you were working, you used to get a paycheck. And so did that paycheck just show up willy-nilly? You didn't know when it was going to come, or did you pretty much know it was going to show up every 2 weeks or every month, whatever the case may be? And they say, oh, no, I mean, yeah, it came every 2 weeks, right? So it was reliable that way. You knew it was going to be there, and you knew when it was going to be there, and so you could kind of plan around that. And when you opened up that envelope, were you always surprised by the amount, or did you pretty much know what it was going to be? No, we knew what it was going to be, right? So it was predictable that way. Again, making it easy to kind of plan and budget and kind of depend on. So our paychecks were reliable and predictable. Same thing with Social Security. Does that check pretty much show up on the same day every month? Yeah. Do you know how much it's going to be for, or is it always a surprise? No, we know what it's going to be for. It's reliable and predictable. So any other income that we get in retirement, what do you think we want it to be? What two things do you think we want it to be? Reliable and predictable? Yeah. We want it to be reliable and predictable, like a paycheck, right? So when we look at ways to take reliable and predictable income, I think it helps to just kind of take a 3-minute course in how income has been taken in the past. Would that be okay? Yeah, sure. Well, one way that income has been taken in the past is bonds. The nice thing about bonds is they have a set rate of interest. So it's easy to calculate what we need for income. Let's say we need $40,000 a year in income, and we know bonds are paying 4%. So if we know we need 40,000 and bonds are paying 4%, it's easy to calculate how much we need to put in bonds. So if I give you a calculator, could you just take $40,000, what we need in income, divide that by 0.04, 4%, and what do you get? $1 million. Yeah, $1 million. Basically what that's saying is if you put $1 million in bonds paying 4%, that'll kick out $40,000 a year in income. Now, what's the first thing that jumps out at you? We don't have $1 million? Yeah. And even if you did have $1 million, is that a little or a lot to put into bonds? Oh, that's a lot. So are you diversified? No. And what's the problem with that? Well, all our eggs in one basket. If anything happens, we're in trouble. Exactly. So that's one drawback. The other drawback is, how old are you? Well, we're 65, right? And so you could live to be 85 or 90, knock on wood. And what happens to the price of things over time? Well, they go up. Why? Well, inflation, exactly. And now the bonds will pay that 4% forever, but they're not going to pay more. So what could happen to that $40,000 a year? I mean, right now we can buy $40,000 worth of stuff, but 20 years from now, what might happen? Well, it's not going to go as far. Right, and why not? Well, because of inflation. So there's that. We can't really be diversified, and then there's the problem of inflation. But the other problem, and we talked about this a little bit, is bonds are sensitive to interest rates, meaning what? If interest rates go up, what's going to happen? Oh, the bonds are going to go down. Now, guys, breaking role play for a second, that's a conversation I would have had with them if they had bonds at the 21-point checklist meeting. So I might need to jog their memory, but they should be able to answer these questions because we went through it at the 21-point checklist meeting. What happens if they didn't have bonds at the 21-point checklist meeting and I didn't talk about this? Then what do I have to do here? I have to have that conversation with them here. Either we have that conversation for the first time here in a way that they tell me if interest rates go up, these are going to go down, not by a little, by a lot, or we have that conversation for the second time here. If you're having it for the second time, it'll go faster than the first time. But just because you had it once, does that mean you can skip it here? No, you can't skip it. Now, they tell me, whether it's for the first time or the second time, that if interest rates go up, these bonds are going to go down. And the only reason I bring that up is because I want them to be able to tell me that I'll be balanced and say this could work, but is it all advantages or are there some disadvantages? Are there some drawbacks? And what are they going to say? Well, no, there are some drawbacks. Now, my whole point to telling this story is so that I can tell the next story, because I know that most advisors aren't going to tell them to ladder bonds in retirement. I just know that that's kind of gone out of vogue. It's not in fashion. Most financial advisors aren't going to recommend that. So if they go back to somebody else, that's not something that they're going to hear. But it's probably something in this age group that they've heard before. And that's why I'm going over it. I tell them it could work, but are there problems? Yeah, there are problems. And what are the biggest problems? Well, if interest rates go up, these are going to go down. That, and what's the other problem over time? Inflation, right. So it could work, but there are what? There are problems. Because of those problems, most financial advisors don't even recommend this anymore. What they recommend instead is a big mix of stocks and bonds, a big pile of money where we put some in stocks, some in bonds. That way we're diversified, and we'll just take our income of, say, 3 or 4% a year from interest or dividends or capital gains, whatever the case may be. And as long as the markets cooperate, that'll work too. But why do I say as long as the markets cooperate? Because here's the thing. Could interest rates go up and the stock market go down? Oh yeah, that could happen. I mean, has it happened any time in the last, say, 10 or 15 years? Yeah, I mean, we've seen it happen. And if that happens, meaning there is no interest, there are no dividends, there are no capital gains because everything's down, if you still need the money, where do you have to pull it from? Well, principal, I guess. Right, but if you start pulling from principal, what do you start worrying about? Well, we start worrying that we're going to run out. Right, so it could work, but what has to happen? The markets have to what? Well, they have to cooperate. Right, and if you're retiring at 65 and you're going to live to be 85, can we count on the markets cooperating for each and every one of those 20 years? Oh no. I mean, eventually we're going to encounter what kind of years? We're going to have some up years. For sure we're going to have some up years, but we'll probably see what during that 20 years as well? Some down years, right? And then we could be in trouble. So it could work, but what has to happen? The markets have to cooperate, right? And what's the likelihood of that happening over a 20-year period of time, 20 years straight? No, that's not going to happen, right? We said we want to plan not just for the good or the bad, but for what? Well, we want to plan for both. Exactly. So can I show you an alternative? Sure. And this is what all my clients do. So I'm going to show them a plan built for them with $375,000, taking the $1,500 a month, 50-50. I explained to them in years 1 through 5, we're going to take the income from this $87,751 in asset 1. That's going to generate that $1,500 a month from 65 to 70. But at the end of those 5 years, that money is going to be gone. It will be spent to zero. Now, sometimes people say, well, wait, we're just spending our money to zero. But what have we, during that 5 years that we've been pulling that income, what have we allowed assets 2, 3, and 4 to do? And they say, grow. Right. And asset 2 grew from 71,874 to 83,479. And now we're going to take our $1,500 a month from bucket 2, and that's what's going to give us our income in years 6 through 10. So we've been getting income now for how many years? And I help them. I'll circle this. 10. Right. And during that 10 years, what have we allowed assets 3 and 4 to do? Grow. In fact, if you look during those 10 years, it grew to how much? $387,063. Right. And is that more or less than the 375 that you started with? Well, it's more. So if there's inflation, do we have to be worried, or do we have a way to take a little bit more money if we need it? No, we have a way to take more money if we need it. That, and this takes you to 75, but if it worked with 375,000, will it work with 387 from 75 to 85? Well, yeah. And as long as we keep growing our money, will we ever have to worry about running out? No. Now, again, does this give you the income that you're looking for? Yeah, it does. And it's guaranteed, which means it's better or worse than the other plans? Well, it's better. Why? Well, because the other plans weren't guaranteed. Yeah, and what's the problem with that? Well, we might not get the income that we're looking for. What's the only plan that's guaranteed? Well, this one. So which one, I mean, do you have a preference at this point? Well, no, we like this one better. And why? Well, because we can rely on the income. Now you're probably wondering, what's asset 1? What's asset 2? What's asset 3? What's asset 4? Were you wondering that? Yeah, actually, we were wondering that. So asset 4, I'll go through and start to explain to them, this is money in the market. Asset 3, I'll take them through the FIA presentation. So that FIA presentation that you guys are all working to learn, if you haven't learned it already, You're going to give that at the implementation meeting one way or the other. It comes right here if you're using a sale plan. It comes at the end of a 21 light if you're doing 21 lights. It comes as part of a growth and safety plan if they're not looking for any income. But again, these days I would tell you 3/4 of the people are going to take income or at least want to be prepared to take income sometime maybe in the future. So you'll show this a lot. And again, I show it in comparison to 2 other plans, the 2 other plans being bonds and a big bucket of stocks and bonds. The reason I do that and I get them to tell me this is the best of the 3, and I don't just show it and say, hey, what do you think of this? How do you like this? If I just showed it and I didn't compare it to anything, guess what everybody would say? It looks really good, but let me think about it. I need to see what else is out there so I can know if this is really the best thing for me. So do I want them going out and searching for other things that are out there? No. So if I don't want them going out and searching for other things that are out there, then guess what I need to do? Show them the other things that are out there. And they also happen to be the things that they think that they ought to investigate anyway, the things that they've heard. They don't need to go out and compare it without me because they compared it with me. I'm like the real estate agent who's taking, if I just showed them one house, guess what they would see? Guess what they would say? It's a nice house, but we need to see other houses before we can decide whether or not to make an offer on it. So the real estate agent shows them, if you ever watch House Hunters, at least 3 houses. And then they can make a decision. That's what I'm doing. I'm showing them 3 houses. The first one, it can work, bonds can work, it's just that what? Well, interest rates might go up. The second one, this big mix of stocks and bonds, it could work, it's just that what? The markets would have to cooperate. Let me show you this as an alternative. Why do you like this? Well, because I don't have to worry about the markets cooperating and I don't have to worry about interest rates. So of the 3, which one makes the most sense for you? Well, this one. Why? Because I need something that's guaranteed. Guys, this is the only plan that's guaranteed. It's not the only plan that you can show people. It's not the only plan that could work, but it's the only one that's guaranteed to work. And so if you want a client and you want a sale 100% of the time, you should show them the one that's guaranteed to work. But should you just show it in a vacuum or should you show it in context? In context. We always show things in context. I know guys that have success with this, just showing this and not putting it in context. That's how powerful it is. But I'll tell you, you will lose some sales that way. If you want to get the sale each and every time, the first thing you do is make sure they tell you, I hate my guy, I don't want to stay where I'm at. The second thing you do is whatever solution you give them, you show it in context. The FIA presentation has context built into it, so you don't have to worry about that. This, we build context into it so that you don't have to worry about that. That's why we don't get, I need to think about it. We get people to say, I don't want to work with my advisor anymore because he hides things from me. And this is better than anything else that's out there. I know it because we just looked at everything else that's out there. All right, so now that we know what the sale plan is, and we know this is why Blueprint Income can't have the kind of success you guys have, because they can't show this in context. That's why they'll get a little bit of traction, but the insurance companies won't be able to let you go because it can't succeed like you can, because you can do these things. But if you don't do these things, you're not going to have any more success than anybody else. Do these things. So how do I create this plan? Well, creating the plan is easy. We're just going to go out to the website. and I timed out here. So hopefully, can you guys see the website? Make sure everybody can see the website. Yes, okay. You can navigate to anything from this green column on the website. So I'm going to go down to the software menu down here at the very bottom, and I'm going to open it up. And you'll see there's 3 sets of software. There's the TRIP software, which I'm not going to talk about today. There's the 21-point checklist software, which we've all been through. You all went through it with me, or you're about to go through it if you're brand new. And then there's the SAIL software, which is that laddering software. SAIL stands for Smart Asset Income Ladder. So it's a SAIL plan I want to create. I'm just going to click on that. And what's going to come up is the software that you see. There aren't that many inputs to this software, so it's really easy, very intuitive. The first thing it wants to know is, do you want income now? Stated income is really income now, or income sometime in the future. So just ignore the maximum income and the growth only. Income now or income in the future. So when we talk to clients, we know, are they thinking about, is their plan to take this right away when they retire? Or are they thinking about retiring in 5 years and taking it then? Or are they not sure when they're going to take it, but it'll be sometime it could be sometime in the future. That would be deferred income. So let me just walk you through income now, and then we'll look briefly at income in the future, and you'll see that it's no different. So we're looking for the client's name. Everybody should know the client's name if we're doing this at the 3rd meeting. No one ever calls and asks me, what do you put there? Everybody knows the client's age at this point. Now here's an interesting question. What if the husband's 67 and the wife is 63? What do you put in there? And I always say you could average their age, but what I found is probably a little bit more effective is just put the age of the oldest. So that it could happen that the wife and the husband aren't the same age. I generally go with the age of the oldest. How much do they have? And by the 3rd meeting, we should know that because we've seen what? Their statements. We know how much they have. And I rarely get any questions about what to put here. Occasionally, people will tell me, well, do we just put the money that they want to put toward income? And what do I tell people? No, you put all the money. Because when we look at that plan, we'll look at it, if you don't remember it, we're going to look at it again here in a second, but we're not using all of the money for income. This is a plan for all of their assets all of the time, making sure that they can take income from some part of it that's guaranteed. But I want to put their entire portfolio. This is a plan for all their money, not some of their money. This isn't just a plan for their safe money. This is a plan for all their money. Here's where we mostly run into problems. Asset weighting. I'm going to put 50-50. These people want half in growth, half in safe. How would I know that? How would I know that? Because at the 21-point checklist meeting, there's a section there called investment weighting. And I made a suggestion on a number that I thought, based on the formula inside that presentation, of what they should have in growth versus safe. And then I asked them, that's the academics number, but it's not their money, it's whose money? It's ours. So what number are you comfortable with? And we talked and we arrived at a number they were comfortable with. The academics might have said 60% safe, 40% in growth. And they said, well, we're a little bit more aggressive than that. We're going to go 50-50. The reason that this is such a problem sometimes is that I talk to so many people who say, we didn't have that conversation. Guys, have the conversation. That conversation is so important to everything you do, whether you're doing a sale plan or any other kind of a plan in the implementation meeting. There's no excuse not to have the conversation. It's there in black and white. It's a talking point in the 21-point checklist. You'd have to literally skip it on purpose not to have had that conversation. You'd have to literally have done it wrong on purpose not to know these numbers. I talk to so many people who say, well, they're conservative. I don't know if it's 50-50 or 60-40 or 70. I just know they're conservative. I'm very confident in that. Have the conversation that's laid out in the tutorial where you get a number. What does conservative mean? I know what it means to me. That might not be the same thing that it means to you, and it might not be the same thing that it means to them. There's no reason to be afraid to have this conversation. This conversation comes late in the 21. By this point, you should be comfortable with these people. There's no excuse not to have this conversation. We just have to stop making excuses for not having this conversation. The problem with it is, can you guess a number based on the fact that they're conservative? Yes, you can guess. And if your guess is 100% dead on, it's a bullseye, then you won't have to go back and show them another sale plan. But if your guess is a little bit off, they're going to say, hey, that's a good guess, but can you show me 55-45? And you've just extended the whole sale process, the whole sales process, another week. And that's if you're a great guesser. If you're an average guesser or a pretty good guesser, you've probably extended it 3 or 4 more weeks. And so don't bang your head if you keep it and come back to me and say, they keep wanting to see alterations. They keep wanting to see other iterations of this, other variables. The reason they're doing that is because you're not just putting in the numbers they give you. You're guessing. You're circling the well until you hit that bullseye. You don't have to do that. The whole system is designed for you to be able to get these numbers without having to guess. That's my little me on my soapbox, I guess. We'll leave it at that. Don't. I can't. When I hear people ask about this, guess what I know? You're not having that conversation. Whatever you say, you're not. If you were, you'd know the numbers. All right, income. How much do they need in income? They might give this to you in months. They might, or a year. They might say, I need it in monthly, but they might give it to me in a year. They might say, I need 40,000 a year. So how do I get to monthly? If they need 40,000 a year, there's an easy way to get to monthly. What is that? Divide by 12. So this should not be a problem either, okay? Say they need, in our example, 1,500 a month. They don't always know this number. If you're talking to somebody who's going to take income in the future and you ask them how much per month are you going to need, they may ballpark it and say, I'm not really sure. We haven't really thought that far ahead. So you're going to have a little conversation. Well, I know I can at least get them 5%, maybe a little bit more. I can do a quick calculation and say, well, 5% of 400,000 is 20,000. Divided by 12 is probably going to be, I don't know, 1,800 a month is probably what I could do comfortably. So I just say, well, what if we could get you an extra 1,000 a month? Oh, that would be good. What about 1,200 a month? Oh, wow, that would be really good. 1,300 a month? Oh, we wouldn't need that. So if I came to you with a plan that had your money 50% in growth, 50% in safe, that was at least 1,300 a month, is that the kind of thing you'd be looking for? Oh yeah, that'd be great. So now I know I can put 1,300 a month in there. You might have to probe a little to get this number. Sometimes they know right away, sometimes they don't. There's a drop-down box where you can do it for 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. I will tell you, I always, not 99%, 100% of the time, use 10 years. That's just a comfortable time frame that people are used to looking forward to. You go to any other financial advisor in the world and they're going to look in the future in 10-year chunks. So I don't care if they come to me and they're 60 years old and I think they're going to be 90, I'm still going to do a 10-year plan. Why am I okay with that? Because you end up with more than you started with. So can we do it ad infinitum? Yes, we can. Growth rates, that's tricky. It's not tricky. To be honest with you, I always start with 1, 3, 5, and 6. That's just what I always start with. Now, when we start looking at these actual investments, branch 4 is the market. So that I'm being conservative here. And I tell people I'm being conservative. And would you rather I was conservative or aggressive? Because if it works with these numbers, what do we know if we do better? Oh, that it'll work even better. Right, so if it works now and we're using conservative numbers, what can we be guaranteed? Well, that it could be a lot better than that, yeah. I don't care if there's good surprises, I just don't want there to be bad surprises. This is an indexed annuity, so you're going to talk to Jerry or Matt about something with a 5% cap. And again, if interest rates go up, caps are going to go up too. Now this one's a 5-year fixed. So you may have to ask Jerry, hey, what's the best rate I can get on a 5-year fixed? What if he says the best rate you can get right now is 3.1? I change that to 3.1. What if he says the best rate I can get right now is 2.75? I change that to 2.75. And this is just, could be an immediate annuity. It could be high yield money market. We can talk about that sometime when you put together a plan. But that's what I start with. And then I just say, in this case, I'll put 5Q Advisor. I hit display, and it shows me what the plan is, something that I can see so that if I had to change any of the numbers or wanted to monkey with it, I still could. If I'm happy with it, I just hit generate PDF, and what comes up is this PDF that this is what I'm going to show the client. This is what they're going to see. This is what's going to be in front of them when I make that presentation. Remember, guys, income is a big deal, and you have a tool to create the only guaranteed income plans available to people. And while you may not be the only person with that tool, because there are other laddering softwares out there, you are the only people with a presentation using motivational interviewing that gets clients to say in their own words, this is the plan I want, and you're the guy I want to do it with. And don't underestimate that. That presentation, not just the plan, but the way you have of presenting it is what separates you and makes you more successful than anybody else out there. Now, if you have questions about a particular plan or case that you think this might be a good fit for, you can give me a call and I'll help you customize a sale plan. And more importantly, I'll help you customize the sale presentation to your clients. So
the great thing about this is and Jeff, you did a fantastic job explaining this. The best thing about this is it's not a product presentation. It is a technique. It is a strategy, and people buy into strategies because it's very apparent that Jeff is not pushing a product here. Jeff is solving a problem here.
All right. So we're all in the office. If you guys have questions, we're here, and hopefully we'll talk to you through the week. If not, we'll talk to you or see you next week at next Monday. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.